a bit too many facts and stuff, and I just wanted to introduce the Mesolithic as it's meant to be introduced, as a topic, as a header. So I want to do something really light this week, and I'm just going to do the register now. So we've got Pringle Andy.
Yeah.
Pool Margaret.
Yep.
No Williams Clare. Oh my God. Samson of Dole.
Hello.
Sabita, the woman with a strange name.
Yes.
Quite good. Roger's away. Gammon.
Present.
Oh, you see, she's doing it the right way, you know? Right, okay, what have we got? Caitlin of the Capel, Drina.
That's me.
And then we want, we've got Rogers of the David.
Brilliant.
Do you see what I mean? Did you see that then? You know, he was very noble when he said that, you know, it was like present. It's almost as if he's the type of man that you would love to love.
You just like lots of presents, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Can I just make just a quick comment? Right, this is about Anne, right? Anne, you know, when you do my classes, you don't need to put lipstick on, you don't need to put red earrings on, you don't need to brush your hair, and you don't need to have a great big cabbage behind your head.
No, well, the cabbage just stays on the wall.
Yeah,
And I've had earrings and the hairdo done all day.
Yeah.
So
you do what you like, and don't take any notice.
So,
Pretty lady.
Yeah.
And you know the insults have got to be around tonight, right? Drina, you're on the insult wave, right? Drina, why do you look like you're in a boiler suit as if you've escaped from a prisoner of war camp? So,
she's not. She's been bad.
You.
Oh, come on, Drina, you love it. You love it. Right, okay. Right, okay. So everybody, I do believe, is present today, other than Claire and Rog, and we're going to be looking at limpet mounds tonight, right, in the Mesolithic period. Now, it was last week that you said I gave you too many facts and stuff last week, which is fine. I just wanted to look at the humble limpet, right? And what we're going to do before I do my text, we're gonna test out what we can do with limpets, and then when we go through my little text, see if any of it's in it, right? So that's what we're going to do. Right, so we've got what limpets can tell us about life on Mesolithic Aronsay, which is off the Hebridean coast of Scotland. So we got a nice bit of stuff here, right? I'm going to sort of delve into this bit of text, and I'm going to sort of come in and out, right? And that's what we're going to do. The fascinating thing about limpets is that it's very much mentioned in the James Dyer book. Ancient Britain, and when you delve into limpets, you start to understand that they're not as straightforward in the archaeological record as we think. Right, so what we're going to do, we're going to go straight onto the whiteboard, and we're going to do this, and we're going to start scribbling. Right, so limpets, what can you do with limpets? Right, you can eat them. Right. Okay. Next, you might be able to sort of cook them so they break down, and you can produce a type of lime that you can spread on fields. Obviously, it's not lime; it's all that calcium and stuff. But you know, it's a lime you can spread. Yeah. Yeah. Pete, what?
Well, you talked about the limpets, but you went on to the shells, the lime from the shells.
Ah, Pete. Yeah, you are right. Yeah, Pete, you've done a nasty little correction there, because when we think about the humble limpet, right, we're never in. Pete has actually made a really good point, right? When we talk about the humble limpet, right, are we talking about the shell, or are we actually talking about the contents inside? And that's a really good point of Pete's. We are actually talking about the whole thing, right? And we're doing this as a generic thing. So when we mention limpets, right, you're going to probably you'll probably work out what part of the limpet we're talking about, whether we're talking about the flesh or the shell. Right, thanks for that, Pete. That was actually quite useful for once. I'm picking on Pete now, right? So what else can you do with limpets? Well, the strangest thing is that if you've shelled the limpets, right, which I think is the point that Pete is making at, it makes good insulation for housing, right? So housing, so that may sound odd, right? But if you look at Skara Brae on the island of Orkney, the buildings are actually built within a shell midden, right? And a shell midden is usually of limpets, right? Now, I've got a little bit of history with limpets, and we're going to do that history with limpets, right? So we're gonna get up here, right? We're gonna go get rid of all that, right? So point one, we're going to be a bit random when we talk about limpets now. So we are doing the Mesolithic period, right? But don't feel you need to correct me, because this is tried and tested, right? So within the archaeological records, I have come across limpets a number of times. And I'm just going to discuss two major examples where I found limpets in the archaeological record. So the first one that we're going to talk about, number one, is actually from a graveyard. And the graveyard that we're going to talk about is at a place called Sully, which is in the Vale of Glamorgan. Now, when I was basically wandering around this graveyard this one day, there was suddenly this gravedigger turned up, and I introduced myself, and it turned out that this gravedigger was the same person who buried my sister in 2006, which was quite strange. And then as I was looking around, there were loads of these limpets everywhere, right? So it's in a church graveyard, which is very much linked to a medieval church. However, it's also linked, part of the graveyard is actually associated with the castle of Sully. Now, the point I'm going to make here is quite simple, is that the limpets, I obviously, obviously took them to date from the medieval period. I.e. they'd been deposited in the ground in the medieval period alongside medieval pottery. Now, if that assumption's right, people were doing something with limpets in the medieval period, right? Now, allow me to correct myself. I've usually presumed, and I've been told time and time again, that this is a statement. If you find limpets on a medieval site, that means that it was desperation food and their diet had declined to such a degree it was limpets were the only thing they had left to eat. What is wrong with that statement is that you are presuming that they are eating the limpets.
Yeah, you are. Yep.
You are presuming that they're eating the limpets, and that is a wrong assumption to make.
Why?
And it's based on all the other classes that we've done. Can you remember the Paleolithic site that we did? We looked at the Paleolithic site of Goff's Cave, right? And when we look at the Paleolithic site of Goff's Cave, what we found dating back to 14,700 years ago, it was presumed that the animal bones that they found associated with the human bones are evidence that the flesh of those animals had been eaten, right? In other words, that means that the flesh of the human bones that we'd found there was also categoric proof that they were eating human flesh. I say no, right? I say no because we're not really getting the data. We're really not getting teeth marks on the bones, the human bones at Goff's Cave. What we are getting is cut marks on the bones, but it doesn't mean to say that the bones, the flesh on the bones, is actually consumed. That was an assumption, a wrong assumption of all us archaeologists. I challenged myself even then back in the day. I remember doing that. Now, back to these limpets. Now, we are presuming that the archaeological evidence in the Vale of Glamorgan at a place called Sully, we are presuming that limpets were used, and that's what we're going to use. We're presuming that they were used. They didn't get there by accident because there were loads of them. You might be able to think of a seagull flying inland and sort of clonking a limpet on the ground. And Pete, that might be one translation, right? But even then, Pete, is it a sign that it's desperation food, even if they did eat them? Yeah, no, exactly.
It's
Pete.
easily accessible food.
Exactly, and it might have been easily accessible food throughout the period. Me and you, Pete, we're gonna run quite nicely today. Now, the other evidence that I do find for limpets, right, is associated with a site that I excavated at St. Bride's, which is also in the Vale of Glamorgan. And when I excavated that site at St. Bride's, we were excavating a site that dated from the 1600s, but we started to come across some really late Iron Age pottery, and very close to that Iron Age pottery was an assortment of limpets. Now, this is the fault I made. I presume that those limpets were actually obviously dating to the period of the Iron Age, right? Because I didn't presume that in the medieval period they were actually eating limpets, because the strata was all mixed up. So those are all mistakes that we associate with limpets, right? The other problem with limpets is that they're basically impossible to date, right? So I told my students down here last night, I said, when you're in a field and I ask you to pick up artifacts, you pick up the artifacts that I tell you to pick up. So if you wander across the field and you find, and I'm saying, right, only pick up pottery that's black, right? And they started picking up pottery that's red, right? I don't want the pottery that's red. I want the pottery that's black, right? But you can date the black pottery, you can date the red pottery, you can date all these different things, right? We can't date limpets without a scientific approach, which means laboratories, right? So we don't pick up limpets because they could be used and seen in the archaeological record from literally any period, right? So what I'd like to do now is also well, Pete seems to know what he's talking about. Pete, other than what we said about eating, cooking the shells on the fire, them spreading them on fields, other than actually using these shell middens, which have got millions and millions of shells to actually use as insulation for housing, right? Can you think of one other purpose for limpets, Pete?
Well, they were used as a bait.
Yes.
To collect
Fishing.
To collect fish.
Yes.
That's one thing. They were eaten, and they were an easily accessible source of very good food, actually. The limpets are not, they're just a bit chewy. They're not bad food as such. And I'm sure in those times, people were glad to go down to the seashore and collect a pile of limpets. And then what do they do with the shells afterwards? They found the shells were very useful for other means.
And the other thing, Pete, you can use them for making jewelry.
Yep,
That's
use them for
another one.
anything.
You can use them for as a hardcore. What's that?
You could use them as spoons.
Spoons, yeah.
Interesting, spoons. See, we got all these different ideas for what
Yep.
these things could be used for, right? So what we are going to spoons. I like it, spoons. So what we are going to do now, we're gonna quickly dive over to Aronsi. So let's just do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to stop sharing, right? And if I've got to suddenly dash to take a phone call, it's to do with one of my children. So I might need to just take a call, but I know you'll all understand. So right, what I want to do now is we're going to do a bit of screen sharing. So here we go. We're going to go to screen. We're going to go to there. We're going to go to there. There you go. The island of Aronsi. So there we go. Let's get this idea where Aronsi is. Right there it is. That's where we're going to go next. We're going to go to the Hebridean Islands, the Inner Hebrides, because that's the Outer Hebrides. This is the Inner Hebrides, right? Oh, look at that! Isn't that great? Oh God, sorry. Anyway, so there's oh, look at that there. Andy, I could have great fun with this, couldn't I? Right, so that's where Aronsi is. So it's in the Inner Hebrides rather than the Outer Hebrides, which are the ones at the above. So we know where Aronsi is. So what I would like to do next is I'd like to do that, and I'd like to do go there, and I'd like to not have that. Oh, and by the way, I had a legal warning last week because I mentioned a certain court case. You're not allowed to mention two certain people who are going through a court case at this minute at all, because this video will be taken down straight away. Right, so which is quite strange. Right, so this is looking at the beach at Aronsi. Now, I've got this nice little text in front of me, and it basically says L is for limpet. Now, I used to have a little booklet that was issued by Time Team, and it had a bit of a digest at the back. And the digest at the back itself, basically, you know, you had A for aerial photography, B for whatever, and then eventually got to L, limpet, and I remember that. Now, this is the thing. This is the danger. This is the danger with archaeology, right? And we assume that certain things in certain periods have certain connections, right? For example, we think that flint was only used in the Neolithic period and the Mesolithic period and before, but flint was still used in the medieval period. So we've got to be very wary. We've got to be very, very wary of trying to fix certain objects with certain periods in time. Obviously, you can work out the ring pull was produced from the late 1960s all the way into the early 1990s, right? There weren't ring pulls before. You had clay pipes that were issued specifically in the late 1500s all the way through to now, right? But when you think about limpets, we've already given you some demonstration that limpets have been seen to be used throughout the years. Now, if we're gonna, and I'm glad Pete made that differentiation at the beginning. You know, are you talking about the shells or the flesh? I'm talking about both. But both have strong parameters. And the other presumption with this, folks, is that we are presuming that by collecting limpets off the shore, and you've got big limpet mounds, is that you're actually eating the limpets, right? Now, there's a danger with that because you could actually chuck the limpets on the land to use as fertilizer, and then as the dying and dead limpets break down into the soil, right? You can then collect the shells. So that's another one that we've missed, fertilizer, and you could think of that from any period. The other thing as well is the other danger with limpets is something that we've come across a lot, right? In our other classes and maybe a little bit in the Paleolithic period. Right now, limpets are a material piece of archaeological evidence. So limpets can survive in the ground well after bones have deteriorated and rotted away. Limpets can survive in the ground even when very basic pottery has decayed in the ground, right? Heavy clay-based potteries that have just basically just melted into the ground. Limpet shells themselves can survive whilst everything disappears, right? So does that mean that they were solely reliant upon limpet shells in the past? You would think so, but that's not exactly the case. Now, limpets themselves, you could see the dynamism with sites such as Aronsay, which are surrounded by water. You know, and if we want to look at the Mesolithic period, move away from 12,000 years ago and go to 10,000 years ago, we could think of limpets being not a seasonal food, but a food that's available all year round, right? Now, that's a really interesting point. I didn't know that the thousands of gorse plants that we've got growing around the land here, that gorse flowers all year round. Yeah, so it's you can use gorse. You can make gorse cakes. You can make gorse flour. You can actually make gorse bedding, gorse honey, all sorts of different things with gorse. So gorse is very similar to limpets, and I think Pete was very forthright in what he was saying. They're really nice to eat, right? But the flesh has other uses as well, and we've given some of those descriptions of the uses of the limpets. Now, what we've got to think about is the island of Aronsay, very isolated, and we think we therefore then make a judgment of the food requirements and sources on Aronsay. Now, here's another one. I'm trying to grab bits of evidence in my little head as we're going through this today. Now, is what I'm about to say a bit contradictory to what I've already said, right? My university lecturer, Simon Clark on Shetland, he basically said, right, the first levels of evidence that we've got for occupation on Shetland is actually limpet mounds, right? So is that saying that limpet mounds are only evidence bearing for the Mesolithic period? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that because the evidence is available from the Mesolithic of undoubtedly decayed, we look for the parameter and the boundaries contained with the humble limpet shell, right? So that's very, very important. So we think of this statement made by the author and archaeologist historian Paul Mellers, who said that these heaps of debris give us a glimpse of lives at a time of transition. Do I agree with that statement? I am very cautious about agreeing with it. But I am then going to say, no, I'm not cautious about that statement at all. Let's read that again. These heaps of debris give us a glimpse of lives at a time of transition. Because last week, did I not say the following? Every single period in history is a period of transition. Every period. There is no real period in history that stands alone as not being a transition. Everything in human history is about movement. And that intersection between the mixture of humanity on the borders of the life that we share with animals. And we again think of Aronsay, and we also think of the level of archaeological work that has been undertaken at Aronsay, and one of the big chunks of a nugget is in fact the work associated with limpet shells. Now, it is without doubt thinking that over 100 years, archaeologists have been working at this windswept domain within an environment of transition on the island of Aronsay. Now, we do know at least the archaeological evidence does tell us that Aronsay was massive 6,000 years ago, was at least massive 8,000 years ago and beyond. Islands such as Aronsay are situations where our human ancestors have exploited to such a degree that in fact the resources control them, not the other way round. What we're saying, we are controlled by what is left rather than what had been when there was a great deal. So then it's more that we've exploited the hinterland around our island at Aronsay, then eventually that island then determines our own complete bent with the human narrative of evolution. Now, I use the word evolution to fit in very much with the word transition, movement, change, evolution. Can I just get into an argument I had with a university lecturer once? I was doing really well when I was talking to a university lecturer once, and I used the word ancestor, and then suddenly the conversation changed. These people are not our ancestors. I feel he's wrong in many ways. Maybe what he was saying is that these people are so far back, the lines of direct descent are really not with us. However, what we can say is that talking about ancestors, talking about our cosmopolitan makeup, talking about the way we've evolved as humans, these are our ancestors. So there you go. Aronsay is remarkably beautiful. The stark beauty within the stark landscape within the gulf of the sea beyond, and those lands beyond that we can only imagine. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where out the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunlit sea. See, there it is. So one thing that we do see about Aronsay is the island is massively known for 1, 2, 5 shell middens, heaps of described kitchen waste. That presents us a problem in the title. However, they would not be there if it wasn't for humankind. Now, here we have to challenge something, right? I'm really in a challenging mood today. We've got to challenge something. Is there any situation that these mounds might not have been created by human beings? Let's just take 2 transects of archaeology. When we look at some of the river estuary margins in Canada, what we see is like antlers and bones everywhere and things strewn along these river margins, right? Along the banks, right? And humans go along, we modern humans go along there and say, that's evidence that we killed all those animals, right? No, it's not. No, it's not. What's happened is that the water has flowed and has deposited all these bones. So you see antlers over there, you see little bones there, you see big collar bones for oxen over there, right? That's not human intervention. That is natural intervention, right? Okay, that's that one thing, right? Are these limpet mounds by any chance accidental? Well, maybe what you could do is you could get a nice rook, right? I love my rooks. and you might get a rook along the shore, and he might get all these limpets and he might chuck them all at one place, right? But no, these are huge mounds. They're definitely evidences of human interaction within our environment. They are definitely evidences of humans out there. But I'm just going to chuck another thing in here. And again, I'm obsessing over limpets. So I went to a site in the Vale of Glamorgan, right? And I went in this field one day, and there were oyster shells on the field. There were limpet shells, and we're talking about 6-7 miles away from the coast, right, near a place called Dufferin House. And I just thought, what are these things doing there, right? They've been spread on the field, but again, could some of that have been deposited by our natural fauna? Our birds, but we don't know. But I'm just trying to challenge myself as I'm going through this. These limpet mounds evidences that people are known to have lived on the island of Aronsay in the Mesolithic period. We could say that also found evidence of structures and hearths used for boiling and cooking food gathered from sea and shore. These two date from the Mesolithic period. Now, we're presuming immediately when we use the word structures and hearths, we immediately think, right, houses to live, hearths for boiling the limpet shells and cooking food. But we haven't actually specified there is limpet shells that we're actually cooking. Very important point. The other thing as well is what we've got to think is that, you know, this mound of limpets is so bloody massive, right? Millions of limpets. Well, why didn't they do more with it? You know? Or is the issue that the mound is so big that is the product of their activity? And we're not talking about, I tell you what, right, we're going to de-shell a couple of 100 limpets today and we're going to put them in the stew, right? And we're going to have a big mound. This is very specific archaeology, and there's a reason and a meaning behind lots of these things, and that's very important. What we do find is archaeologists have also identified bones and shells from at least 30 species of marine life in the debris of these ancient rubbish heaps. So in other words, they're limpet mounds, but they're full of other debris from 30 species of marine life. By virtue of the remoteness, lay undisturbed for so long under a thick covering of sand. Stop. Now, one of the things in archaeology is that we're very, very aware of is a lack of a complete picture, right? So I don't know if any of you are fans of Sharp, the series. Anyway, they basically had there was a siege and they found a load of oyster shells, for example, and they burnt them and basically obviously they heated it up. It had the same properties of lime. They blew it onto the enemy, and people were getting temporary blindness because of the lime in their eyes, right? Because it reacts with water. And you start to think, well, you know, these limpets from the past, if we were able to find mounds, we could do something with it in later periods. So, say for example, there's a limpet mound, the limpet mound in Silverdale, right? So, in the medieval period, they dig into this huge limpet mound. They put the limpets in the fire, and then they spread that ash on the fields, and that then is gonna make an acidic soil quite neutral, because the alkaline properties of the limpet shells. What I've just said there, I've removed the archaeological evidence from previous periods. I've removed what we could say to be the archaeology of previous periods, and we've just, you know, it's gone, right? There would have been limpet mounds basically everywhere, right? They would have been everywhere, right? But by virtue of the archaeology and how our times have changed throughout history, the archaeological evidence associated with limpets has naturally been removed. And what do limpets have in common with with our natural environment. Limpet mounds are going to be relatively close to the sea, right? So as water levels have risen, any limpet mound sites have just been washed away and lost forever, right? So the limpet mounds that we find on the island of Aronsay are naturally very, very important, but they only give us a part of this enigmatic picture associated with our friendly little limpets. These mounds on the island of Aronsay, because of the complete isolation of Aronsay, lay undisturbed for so long under a thick covering of sand. Easily for most abundant, these are easily, as Pete said, the most abundant of mollusks to be found, and very easily to be seen. The majority of the mollusks and sea species, 30 of these species of marine life, the humble limpet dominates. But naturally, the humble limpet has a very, very hardy shell. So if we sort of click down there, oh, hang on a minute. Let's sort of there. Oh, there they are, little limpets. And notice how there are all these little sort of lines have actually been formed by the limpets themselves. Limpets can grow an incredible length of time, a bit like Pete. Limpets can be found clinging to rocks all around the coast of Britain, so it's a leveler. There's lots of limpet shells to be found around our coast, resembling, as my notes say, a typical Chinese hat. The shell of the mollusk is conical, but with ridges running from its outside edge to the peak. So each of the, obviously it's conical, but sort of each of these sort of layers, these sort of growth rings, indicate the age. Inside the soft body of the limpet is as vulnerable as a Dalek without its armor, right? I think that's a good analogy. Now, Pete's eaten limpets, I've eaten limpets, and actually, when I was a child, I went down to the beach and I picked up winkle shells, limpets. At that stage, you could get little small prawns. I collected a load of them as well. A few cockles, a few mussels, took them all home, boiled them up, and that was basically it. And limpets can be a bit tough, but then again, when you think about it, lots of food can be a bit tough as well. If you slice it up, it's a really nice food. It really, really is. And it's ready available. So what we are going to do is we're going to think about this. We're just going to think about this statement, right? This next statement coming up. This statement is, in the tough history of the Scottish Islands, limpets were eaten mainly at periods when other foods were scarce. Is that true? Today, they are used by fishermen as bait and feature on the menus of only the most adventurous free food enthusiasts. Okay, we'll agree with all that, but what about the first sentence? In the tough history of the Scottish Islands, limpets were eaten mainly at periods when other foods were scarce. Well, we're only saying that because, and actually this is a double-edged sword. Can you just see the fault in that statement, right? If you're saying that limpet shall dominate the Mesolithic archaeological evidence, and it's a food, a desperation food, where's all the other food that they were meant to have eaten when they weren't desperate? It's not really there, is it, folks? So the answer is that statement, I will disagree. We're going to say that limpets could be seen to be a very important food source, not the be all and end all, but a food source that's used for a very long period of time. And also, if they, as these limpet mounds, there's millions and millions and millions and millions of limpets in these limpet mounds, and there's 5 mounds, right? It doesn't look like desperation food to me. It really, really doesn't. I'm sorry, it doesn't. So what we could say is that the archaeologist Paul Mellers, who's the emerite professor of prehistory and human evolution at Cambridge, he had visually visited Aronsay in the mid-1970s. Over the course of 5 field seasons, often working in driving rain and at the mercy of Scottish midges, the archaeologist Sir Paul Mellors and colleagues excavated samples of shell material from all 5 middens on the island. So this is all really, really important stuff. Now, what we do know is that the latest possible dates of these mounds goes back about 5,500 years ago, which puts it for me in the Neolithic period. But obviously the earlier dates are what intrigues us today for the Mesolithic. That's the latest possible date, about 5,500 years ago. So what we do find, we know about these dates. We know through radiocarbon dating that archaeology has been able to show that the middens belong to the Mesolithic period. And in regards to Aronsay, probably the later periods of the Mesolithic as well, the much later periods of the Mesolithic. But again, what we've got to think about is that there's a lot of them. I'm going to chuck in a little fact. It's associated with the humble cow. Did you know, protein value, you'd have to eat 100,000 limpets to equate to the protein value of a fully mature cow, right? Now, I don't know. I'm a vegetarian, but in Pete's case, he loves meat, so Pete probably eats a whole cow a year. But sorry about that, Pete. But it does make you wonder how much red meat you guys eat every year. And if you think about volume-wise, if you do eat the equivalent of a cow every year, then that equates to 100,000 limpets, which is a lot of work. But limpets are naturally readily available, massively readily available. Modern visitors to Aronsay might well ask themselves why people would have chosen to live in such a far-flung environment. Stop! That's your perspective. That's not necessarily their perspective. This was the only life that they knew. So to them, it's not far-flung. It might be far-flung from London, right? To them, it's the only life that they knew. But I think the point being made is today, Aronsay is 8 miles from the mainland. Back then, it would have probably been, a few miles away from the mainland, not 8, right? So, but it was still an island. Nevertheless, it was still an island. As fishermen will tell you, even today, the waters around the Aronsay and the bigger island of Colonsay are rich in seafood, as they would have always been rich in seafood. Oh, have I just said something there? They've been always rich in seafood. So why do they need to go to the effort of eating bloody limpets if they ate the limpets? Oh, right. And Pete's going to say, of course they did, but we've already given examples when maybe they weren't. And actually, this is another point. If you want me to chuck this around, you could say that they had the energy to de-shell millions of limpets, right? Because their food source was coming from somewhere else. Therefore, they were able to use the flesh from the limpets for another process altogether. Another interesting juncture. What's so fascinating about the Aronsay middens is that they date from a time when people were on the point of moving from being hunter-gatherers or hunter-fisher-gatherers to farmers, right? Now, I don't like using those statements. I don't like saying that the Mesolithic period was a period of hunter-gatherers, because what we do see, all the evidence now in the Mesolithic period tells us that we have a push for animal husbandry, we've got a push for agriculture and all these absolutely wonderful things. What's so fascinating about Aronsay is that these heaps of debris give us a glimpse of lives at a time of transition that we mentioned not so long ago. So what we're going to do, we're going to go down there. Oh, nice. There's a little story associated with this, and I can remember doing this with Andy years ago. a little sort of, you know, there's a reason for this little chart, and we'll sort of go on to that, right? But you know, there we go. And again, that's what Oronse looks like today. And there it is, looking at the beach. So the work by the archaeologist Mellors focused on the range and relative importance of different food resources as revealed by the contents of the middens. So we've already said that. We've already said that the limpet mounds don't just reveal limpets. They reveal other food sources, right? And this is all mixed in with the limpet shells, right? So hang on a minute. Let's think about this one. So if in amongst the limpets, there's little bones and there's little shells of other animals, doesn't that indicate that they had access to other animals to eat? And they weren't just reliant upon limpets. And we've got a rich fishing mollusk landscape within the hinterland that is the sea around the island. And when you think about it, they would not have exhausted the food source. They're not, it's not a massive population. So they would not have exhausted all other food sources. So what is going on here? So debris from both fish and shellfish was evidence. Analysis of these deposits showed that one species, the coalfish, accounted for 90% of all the fish bones within the limpet mound. Among mollusks, limpets greatly predominate over other mollusks such as whelks and the humble periwinkle. Periwinkle. So it's not hard to come up with plausible explanations for the preference of limpets, which are plentiful. And I think me and Pete will disagree with this following statement. They taste like bits of car tire. Not that I've tasted car tire, but they are meatier and more nutritious than whelks and winkles. Furthermore, limpets are a lot easier to extract from their shells. These factors combine to make limpets a more energy efficient resource. So what we're going to do now, we are going to go on with a break, right? And you know, this is what we're doing today. This is what we're focusing on. And the shapes of limpet shells vary according to where they are found. So that's what we're going to do after the break. So what I'd like to do now is what I do is that. And there I am again. And there we go. Oh, and by the way, can I, right, okay. This is me and Margaret now. Margaret, you and I are going to get really close, okay? Get in there, right? You know this pirate thing that I'm doing at this minute with this beat. By the way, I went on a boat yesterday as well. Mm-hmm. What other role with this facial hair could I play? And think about the nose, and don't be afraid to say it.
I'm just Guy Fawkes.
No, shut up. It's me and Anne. It's me and Anne going. Anne, come on, think about it. What other role could I play?
Captain.
What? I'm already playing a captain. Right. Come on.
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan?
Yeah, Captain Hook was in Peter Pan. It's different from the one you're doing, isn't it?
And you're sounding a bit faint, but you know what somebody said to me yesterday? They said, with your massive hooter, you could play a Neanderthal.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, thanks, yeah. Margaret. I wasn't asking you. Enough of you lot already. Right. What I want to do, right, is I want to ask, is there any questions, first of all, from Anne?
No, that's really interesting. I mean, it was very surprising. You know, just studying. I'd heard nothing about Olympic things, and very surprising that they're there, and you can find so much about them and things they were used for. And yeah, very interesting.
Thank you, darling. We did get all that, but your mic's a little bit muty today, but we did get all that. Right. What about Drini, the escapee from Guantanamo Bay?
No questions. It's really interesting. You put so many points out. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah, Gina, we don't always have to be a creep, okay? That's Anne's job. That's Anne's
But you
job.
like
Okay?
it, though, don't you?
I have to be a creep, do I, right?
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what? My official title is Captain.
Captain.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get Pat on now, right? Come on, Pat. We can't get Pat on.
You muted, Pat.
I think she's trying to get it on.
Oh,
Oh,
Pat's been trying to get it on with me for years. Right, what I'm going to say is, I'm going to say to Pat,
There she goes. She's got it on.
Yes,
Pat,
fine.
do you know when you first saw me as a pirate in Newquay, right? It's slightly changed from there now. Yes, I'm apparently the official pirate of Newquay.
Wow.
And I just do raw pirate. I wander the streets of Newquay doing raw pirate.
Wow.
Anyway, Pat, anything you'd like to say?
No, I can't get any interest in shells. Except pretty
can't?
shells. Just pretty shells.
Oh no, come on! You've let me down. The other girls are into it. Anyway, Pat, we'll move on to
Okay.
Margaret.
Well, my limpet knowledge is zilch. But, are they just on the seashore, or do they grow in fresh water as well?
Just see,
Just salt water.
They just-
salt water.
It's just salt water. Salt water.
I mean, when I was a gal, when I was a
Well, you
young
were a girl.
when I was a young girl, we used to go to Fleetwood quite a lot. They used to have stalls selling shellfish and whatnot. And but I never came across a limpet. They had mussels and oysters, cockles, shrimps, but I never ever came across a limpet.
They're not
I think they
popular.
just gone out of fashion.
Yeah.
Not as tasty as those.
I would actually say you're talking about Fleetwood, London, yeah. So
Oh, Fleetwood near Blackpool.
oh, right. So you're
port.
talking about Fleetwood in London. Oh, I was going to say, if you go into some of the markets in London, there's not going to be as many limpets around because it's a muddy shoreline rather than a rocky shoreline. And it's where you get gold. Right, Andy.
Yeah, I find that whole subject really quite interesting. One, like you said, that it's very difficult to date them. So I wondered whether, like at Skara Brae, whether the house came first and the limpets built up as they chucked them out, or other way around. And also, I think what's not coming into this is like Margaret was touching on there, whether they're fashionable and the fact that they're more nutritionally useful. It's possible that they knew that, and therefore that's why they ate them more, or if they did eat them, but than other shellfish. And they're much easier to get hold of as well, because when the tide goes out, they're just on the rocks waiting for you. You don't have to go looking for them. So
How do they multiply?
that's getting a bit too personal.
Yeah.
By being friends.
Sex life of them. What's their sex life?
But what they do, there's a limpet shell, right? And it's so the other one sort of moves up a little bit on top of the other limpet shell. And this big. Actually, I'm going to draw an image of it now, because I know exactly how this works, right? So what you do, right? Basically, if you've got the rock like this, the one limpet shell slightly moves up, right, and then the other limpet sort of goes on top like that. And there's like a foot thingy that goes underneath, and then that's what happens.
But you don't see it because it's underwater when they do that. They're a bit shy.
Yeah, they're a bit shy. So basically, there's this big, long, wormy-like thing, which is basically that, right? And that sort of slips underneath.
It's true. It's true. He's not making it up.
And do you know what? I can even find you a video on YouTube, but I don't think I got time.
Yeah.
But they get glued together.
No, they don't.
No,
because
no.
It's underwater. No.
They're very gluey, aren't they?
Yeah, that's when they're
No,
most vulnerable.
no, they're not gluey at all. It's
No,
suction.
it's actually, and they're
Dysfunction,
quite
yeah.
amazing. They do grind into little circles in the rock that they attach on if they've been there for some time, like it showed in one of those pictures. And I just think that's amazing from just a little shell that suctions. It's just grinding away slowly.
And Pat's getting into this slowly. He really is, I can tell.
Isn't it like a slimy glue though? That
No,
No.
No, right, okay. I know what you're
Suction.
talking about. There is a bit of a
It's
ooze to them,
suction.
right? But it's not like a glue. It's like a weird, yeah. But there is suction, yeah.
is it
It is
like a
suction.
muscle? Is it a muscly?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah, a bit
okay.
like think like what's the one? Not a clam, like an oyster. Has got that in they all together. They've got the muscles and the shell that it just holds onto the rock using suction and very well as well.
Yeah. Oh,
They
absolutely.
say
Yeah.
something like a limpet, don't they? I think.
Yeah.
Or have
Yes.
I made that up?
Oh God,
No, it's true.
please. I want this to end. I really do.
Well, you
Right,
started it.
No, Margaret started it by asking them how they had intercourse.
Oh right, yeah.
And Margaret, basically, that thing that protrudes from underneath is actually a big muscle.
Yes.
Is
Of course
it?
of course it is.
Yeah.
And there's
Oh,
a
can I-
video about it, is there?
Can I just say, in me and Andy's defense, those videos that we've seen about limpets having,
Yeah.
relations, it was by accident we watched the videos.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I believe they all turn into males eventually, don't they?
Oh, I hate to getting technical now. I don't know.
Oh God, yeah. Oh God, yeah. Right, let's just move on.
Is that why there's
go
so
on.
many of them?
Do you know what? We were supposed to be having a short question time. Right, David. Right, David, it's not time to finish. So when I ask if you've got any questions, right, it's not the end, right? So David, we're on the break. I got to be specific with Dave because he sometimes is a bit prompt. Right, Dave, anything you want to say?
Oh, we're on a break.
Oh, they-
All right, Dave, that's the most sensible thing Dave's ever said in his life. Right, okay. Peter, anything you want to say, darling?
Yes. Now,
Oh, God.
if you think about a family who are feeding the family on limpets at the time, and they say they've got 4 children, the children will have about 5 limpets each. The adults will have about 10 limpets each to make a reasonable meal. And by this time, you think you've got 60 shells. And if you have that over a short period of time, it's going to make a big pile of shells. The shells are very useful from then on, yes. And they have found other uses for the shells, which is good. But to feed a family with them, they need lots of limpets. And
Can I? Yeah, but no, Pete is very right, and actually, Peter's actually completely missed the point because Pete has missed the point that we look at limpets. We've that's what we've done from the beginning. We said, oh, you can't, they're really tough, blah blah blah. Why would you want to eat them, right? Well, hang on a minute. Aren't they a good alternative when you haven't got a rabbit wandering around? Actually, there's going to be more flesh on these limpets than you are going to look at the effort it is going to be to kill a rabbit and then to cook the thing, right? To be honest with you, Pete, I'm going to go for the limpets.
well, yes, they're so easy to collect.
Sorry, just thinking something that made me think of something else then. If they're that useful, why is there so many of them left lying around?
Andy, shut up.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, Andy, Andy, we need to do that point. We were going to have a break, but it's your fault, Andy. David can come over your house and sort you out. Right? Can we have a little vote a minute? Right? With everything that we know, right? We're going to have a little bit of a vote now, right? You've either got eating chicken, but you've got to kill it, right? And you've got to pluck it, and you've got to do everything, and you've got to cook it, or limpet shells, You can even keep the limpet shells in their shells and chuck them into a bowl and boil them, right? I'm going to start. Pete, I'm going to go for eating limpets. What are you going to go for?
Oh yeah, eating limpets. Yeah,
Okay.
it is so easy to collect and
Yeah.
eat at times of when other things are in short supply.
Right. Okay. Next person to vote. Remember, if you get a chicken, you've got to kill it, you've got to pluck it, and you've got to cook it. Right. So, Andy, what are you going with?
Oh, limpets, definitely.
Margaret, what are you going to go with?
Limpets, but chicken on a Sunday, and I get Andy to throttle it.
Margaret, what are you? Gina, what are you going with?
Limpets, please.
What are you going to go with, Anne?
Well, I'll try a limpet, and if I didn't like it, I'd go for the chicken. So it would be.
Oh, you remember you've got to kill a
limpet if I
chicken.
liked them.
What are you going with, David?
Chicken, I hate fish.
All right, fair enough. What are you? Who's left? Pat, what are you going to go with?
I think I'll have chicken with David.
Right, so are you going to kill a chicken and pluck it and everything?
I'll get someone else to do it.
No, you have to do it yourself.
Oh
No,
no!
you've got to do it yourself. I'm sorry, you've got to do it yourself. Right. So, in other words, in a minute, right, we've just done a quick survey, right? The survey basically says, right, that suddenly limpets are popular, right?
Yeah.
Overnight, and you're starting to think that, yeah, and that then feeds into Andy's point, right? Andy, right? Your point was, and actually, this has actually worked really well. I don't know why Andy put that question in then, but it's really worked well. Andy made the point: is if limpet shells are so useful, why do we find so many mounds? Right? Okay, then, Andy, I'm going to chuck this back at you. Victorian rubbish tips, right? Billions and billions of glass bottles left behind.
Yeah.
If the glass was so useful, why did they leave it behind? But they left it behind. The glass is very useful, right?
True.
What about this as well? Why do we bury human beings? Why don't we just use the bones for something? You know, I think your point is a very good point, right? But Andy, how do we know that the mounds that they created didn't have a purpose?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I've chucked that
you're
back.
getting very close to ritual there, you know.
Oh, shut up, you boring man.
Yeah.
Why is it
No,
always
there
one-
could be. Yeah. They could
exactly.
have some meaning. Yeah.
Could have used them for trading, could they?
Yeah.
Trading.
Yeah. On that note, I'm going to listen to a song by Joe Armour Trading. Oh, and actually, that is we are going to have a break, but David's going to lose his rag in a minute. He's saying he's got no control over this class. Right. Okay. One thing, trading. Right. Well, actually, that is really interesting. You've made a really interesting point. That is a really interesting point, because trading, when you think about it, okay, let's look at this. Andy, there's been when I say half a dozen silver Viking hoards found in Cumbria. I'm not going to be far out, am I?
Yeah.
So why do we find all these, the Silverdale hoard and so on? Why do we find all these Viking silver hoards when the silver's so useful? Why has it just been left behind? And if you want to look at limpet mounds, maybe the limpet mounds had another purpose, but they've been left behind, just like the silver hoards. And I think that is a very important point.
Do they count as hoards then?
Oh.
If you analyze it like that, they would count as a hoard, wouldn't they? So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, well, that makes it even more interesting. It's a bit like all the gold hoards from the gold mines in Norfolk, right? And Andy, that's the point, isn't it? There are loads of gold hoards in Norfolk.
Yes, there are.
and the majority of gold hoards are found in Norfolk.
Yeah.
Maybe the coastal people that could get hold of loads of limpets when they were travelling inland, they could trade maybe a couple of dozen limpets for a rabbit or something.
Well, yeah.
More than a couple of dozen.
I'm with that. But on that note, we are going to take a break. I need a cup of tea. And sadly, guys, we need to finish about around past today. So we're going to have a quick. Well, I've been going solidly hammer and tongs for over an hour and 2 minutes, right?
Wouldn't go the hammer and tongs that much.
Right.
Andy, do you know what it's like singing on a pier in Yuki, right? For a whole hour?
No, I haven't done that one, no.
And having women throw themselves
Well,
at
this
you?
is why pirates' careers are quite short. Yeah.
He seems to
The golden age was only about 30 years or so.
Yeah, exactly. And a pirate's career is usually only about 2 years.
Yeah. Is that because they hung them? It's nothing to do with them being bad, because they just weren't good singers.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. Right. Okay. Break.
Yeah.
Break.
Right. I got to do that. Right. 8:48 break.
Hey, didn't we do well in the Eurovision Song Contest? Did you see it, Anne?
No, I didn't see it, no.
Oh, we did really
But
well.
who actually won the European Song Contest? Please don't tell me it was Ukraine.
Ukraine won, but Britain came second.
Yeah. Britain won. The judges said that it was the best one, but the popular vote by the public made the Ukraine win. But the Ukraine was quite a good song too. So
yeah, but
so he did very well. It was a good song actually.
Even France gave us top points. Even France, which is just a miracle, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's not political then. They said, oh, everybody hates us. Everybody hates us. This is why we don't get any points. But it's just that we've always had rubbish songs, haven't we?
Yeah, they haven't been very good.
No.
Oh, I shall have to have a look at it then, see if I can catch up on it. I don't usually watch it.
Oh, I love it. I love Eurovision.
Yeah, I used to watch it for years. I watched it and then, I don't know. I never know why I stop doing things sometimes.
It used to be Katie Boyle. Do you remember her?
No, the name, I can't remember
Katie
what she was like.
Boyle used
What-
to always
What did
present-
she sing? Oh,
presenter.
Yeah.
It always did seem, though, although you're saying that it wasn't, it always did seem rigged, didn't it? Or often the voting seemed rigged when you saw what won.
Well,
I mean, the fact that Ukraine was coming out, I thought that's rigged, you know, before we started. I heard they were likely to win, and I thought, oh, yeah, they will, you know, because.
yeah.
well, they're meant to host it.
Sorry for them.
They're meant to host it, aren't they? The winning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I find it very strange that the Russian people don't really know what's happening.
Yes.
Mm.
I've been
Well,
to
they-
Russia.
I
few
think
times.
they think they do, don't they? But they're just not being told.
I've met the Russian people and they are fine.
Yeah.
They're really friendly people.
Yeah.
I've been to Odessa and I've been to Archangel and places like this. We had a football team in Archangel. I asked the local club secretary if we could have a game of football. And he said, yes, you can get a team, we'll have a game of football.
Yeah.
They supplied us with all the equipment and took us to a stadium and we had a football match.
Mm. I think, though, as you're saying, the people of Russia were lovely. I think that would probably be true of almost every peoples in the world. And if they could vote, they would never vote for wars. Any of the peoples. I don't know how we manage, all of us, to get these idiot leaders that want to take us into war. And it isn't just Russia. I mean,
No, that's absolutely right.
leaders all around the world.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
And as I say, the people, all the peoples, if you had democracy and they could vote, you would never get wars, would you? They'd be demanding that their leaders went and negotiated.
Once they get a bit of power, they want to show what they can do. And sadly, it turns out.
And it always seems to be confrontation, and
yep.
But it's strong to be like this instead of strong to be, looking for peace, which it would be. I don't know. I find it upsets me a lot.
Yep, there we are.
So I'm not surprised you found the Russian people nice.
Well,
I mean, my daughters visited Russia and they said how nice the people were that they met, and but I think that's probably true everywhere.
My grandson was out in Far Eastern Russia and they were lovely to him.
Yeah.
They wanted to have their photograph taken with him because he was British. We want our photo taken. Me and families wanted to bring him in, and they were really lovely to him. He was a student. Well, he wasn't a student then. He was out there surveying drilling operations for copper and gold.
Yeah.
Oh, look, there's Baldrick.
Sage and onion, sage and onion, sage and onion.
I've never known a turkey that liked being cuddled by a human. Does it like being cuddled? You're having to hold him very tightly. Probably terrified, poor thing.
Mind that crow used to sit on his shoulder, didn't he?
I know. He's like Dr. Dolittle, isn't he?
He is a bit, yeah.
Perhaps we should call him that.
Well, perhaps that could be his next acting trip, being Dr. Dolittle.
Dr. Dolittle.
Yeah, Dr. Dolittle.
Suggest that to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a nasty blowout yesterday on my back rear tire.
Oh, that doesn't happen much these days, does it?
But I took it and had it off and changed, the tire changed. And I said to the chap who was changing my tire, what do you think done it? Oh, this is what done it, he said. A vaping machine.
Wow.
And it was inside the tire.
How
He
did
said
that get in
the
there?
bang was probably when the battery blew up,
Wow.
when you ran over it.
All right. Right.
And so obviously people are chucking them out onto the road. I ran over it and it punctured its bullet. Blew a little hole in my tire.
Wow.
And they said they've had 8 of these within the
Wow.
last couple of months.
Didn't know that.
No.
What would it be?
Hmm?
What did you run over?
A vaping machine. You know, these things they use for smoking, vaping.
All right.
Yeah. And say you found a bit, the piece of it was still inside the tire. And apparently it stunk of Coca-Cola. So that was the flavor of it that they were using at the time, the sound of it. Yeah.
What do they do? Just throw them out the cars or something?
Well, they must do, yeah.
Just chuck them out.
Just chucked it, yeah.
They don't normally because they reuse them. So
Well, then they can, of course they can.
Yeah.
They're quite expensive, I thought.
yeah, they are. Yeah.
To
So-
chuck out, but hey, right now they've had 8 of the
Yeah.
same way. 8 tires in the same way.
Mm.
They said it's all right for us. We're changing the tires. We're fine, but not so good for the people who driving the cars. Mm. I'm invited to a civic function tomorrow.
Ooh.
That sounds posh.
Oh, it does sound posh, yes.
You'll have to put, you'll have,
Wear a nice suit.
you'll have to put a tie on.
Well, yes, I don't know. Shall I put a tie on? Can I get by with an open neck shirt and a blazer?
Oh, I
Yeah.
think wear a dicky bow. Wear a dicky bow. Pete.
Oh no, I won't wear a dicky bow. God,
No. My brother
I'm
when
only
he was-
seeing the mayor.
Yeah. When my brother was a little lad, he had a bow tie that lit up.
Oh,
I can
Excellent.
remember on Pancake Tuesday, he decided to toss the pancake, and every time his arm went up, his bow tie lit up. So did you say you're meeting the mayor?
well, yeah, it's one of our. I was in the Red Cross for a number of years. I was an instructor.
Mm.
And one of the young lads that came through this became a really good volunteer, and he was volunteering a lot. And they're going to name a community centre after him.
Ah,
And so they've called on me and another instructor to come to this civic do.
very good.
Yeah, so yeah, we see what it is. Brian Foley, he was a really good lad. Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Mm. I don't know who's going to be. I don't even know if the mayor is going to be there or not, to be honest with you. I just assumed it'd be somebody like that.
Mm.
So have you got to make a speech or anything?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
Do you think they'd have said so by now? Did you need to prepare something?
Well,
wouldn't you?
yeah, they would. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't had many calls for speakers lately.
No?
Well, not since COVID, of course. You know, COVID, everything slowed down. And getting a couple of requests nowadays for a call for a speaker, but
Have
I
you-
used to have about 2 a month at one time.
Yeah. No, we're still not back on our feet yet, quite.
But no, we're not. No.
No.
Well, COVID isn't over, is it? I mean, there's new variants in the country. I mean, it's
Yeah.
well, although everybody's sort of getting relaxed and think it's all over, it isn't yet.
No.
No. No, you're right. No,
And now we've got monkeypox too.
we've got
Oh,
monkeypox.
monkeypox, yeah. Oh,
What the
that
heck's that?
looks horrible, doesn't it?
It does.
Not quite sure why they're bothering to tell us about that, because you seem to get it. If you get it, it seems to be very mild.
Yeah.
I think it's just a bit of scaremongering, to be honest, and distraction.
They'll be calling it Monkey Gate. They put gate on the everything.
Well,
Yes.
apparently, if you've had,
Nuts that.
if you were vaccinated against smallpox,
Mm.
Yeah.
apparently that you should be good.
Yeah.
Because that's where vaccination comes from, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The vax, the cows, the
Yeah.
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 milking girls who were immune from smallpox.
Yeah, that's
Well,
right.
this is going to get rude in a minute, milking girls. Right. Okay, right, let's get started. Let's crack on. Do you know what? Talking about milking girls, Anne would make a good milking girl. I could see with a stool.
Hmm.
You know. I was talking about udders and teats of lambs earlier on with the local farmer, mastitis. That was quite an interesting conversation. Right, okay, right. Where are we? We're gonna crack on with where we were, right? And I'm hoping that we can just right, okay. I'm just gonna I got to remember. Right, here we go. That's it.
We're talking
so
about
everybody's-
limpets.
Yeah, Pete, I know we are. Actually, after this class, Pat's going to go, oh my God, I'm all limpeted out. She's going to go. That's what she's going to do.
Gonna say,
Right, okay.
Stuck on you.
I'm stuck on you, my darling. You love me. I love you too, my darling, and you know. Oh, right, okay. Hang on. What I'm going to do, I'm going to check that off a minute. Right. What I'm going to do, it says you share, right? And if I do that quickly and it goes there and I go, but don't let me, I want you to see me as I'm talking. This has ruined my day. Right, okay, we're going to next go on to, where's my little other thing? Right, okay, here we go. Limpets, right, good. Right, the shape, the shapes of limpet shells, vary according to where they are found. Right, this is a really interesting thing. Limpets inhabiting the low parts of the tidal range are generally much flatter than those occupying the higher parts of the shore. So, right, look, what we need to do, obviously, this gives you an idea of the shape and size, but what I want to do is obviously get you a little bit of a map. So if we do this and we go like this, and you guess what it is yet, and apparently Rolf Harris is making a comeback. So what we're talking about, we're talking about, if we talk about that there, and that's the level, that's high tide. So obviously we're talking about the limpets inhabiting the lower parts of the tidal range are generally much flatter. So these little limpets here, and the ones further up here that are much bigger, right? You love my art, I know. So the ones lower down are much flatter, and the ones upper, right, are higher, and they're a lot bigger. Measurements of the height of limpet shells found in the Midlands reveal that they had been collected almost exclusively from the lower part of the tidal range. And chiefly from the very low tide situations exposed only during spring tides. Well, that's interesting that these were collected for a certain reason, the smaller ones, and much flatter ones. Right. Now, what we got to do, we got to talk about why. Now, the archaeologist Mellors proposed two possible explanations. First, is limpets from lower tidal zones are tender than those tender than the others, right? So they're going to be a bit more palatable and quicker to eat.
Yep.
So that's these ones, right? So this is what he's saying. Secondly, continuous harvesting of limpets may have led to an over-exploitation of more easily accessible areas of the shore. So what they're saying is if you eat all these ones, right, this is going to be exhausted quicker. But if you eat these ones, the resource isn't going to be exhausted as quick. Now, I think there's a point to be made here, is we're talking about over-exploitation. Then it makes you wonder why they ain't going for all the other all the other mollusks and all the other fish and sand eels and eels and all the rest of it. All interesting questions there. With the disappearance of limpets from the upper levels, the human population sought foodstuffs close to the low tide line. So it's very likely that there was a mechanism into collecting limpets. So that's really interesting in itself, that there was a technique to harvesting limpets. Advances in technology are now enabling the archaeologist Mellors to come up with answers to other key questions, especially the question of seasonal patterns of fishing, set fishing and harvesting of whatever supplies came the human population's way. Now, I'm going to say it. I'm going to actually say it. Is the human population going to exhaust its bounty of shellfish and other fish around the shoreline? I'm actually going to argue no, because the population's relatively small. But that's the card I'm going to put on the table. Make of that as you will. I'm not going to argue against this. Although abundant around Aronsay and other islands in the summer, this is a point. Many of the fish may migrate into deeper water late in the autumn. This means that communities relying upon marine life would need to look elsewhere for sustenance during winter and spring. Now, this is a really interesting point, and the point being made is that their diet was primarily associated with a fish diet. So then it makes you wonder, why didn't they eat berries? Why didn't they eat tubers? Why didn't they eat the seeds associated with the long grasses? Why didn't they eat meat of other animals? I'll come to you in a minute, Pete. But what we are starting to think about is that there are many factors associated with these limpet shells, and particularly these 5 shell middens on the island of Aronsay. Over to you, Pete.
It's just that the ones, as you say, which were slightly underwater, much more easily removed and much tastier probably than the ones, the larger ones, which were up above the waterline. So that they were more acceptable for as a food.
Yeah, that does make sense.
And they are easier to remove because they haven't got the same suction when they're underwater as they do when they're out of the water.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And obviously, if you've got calm waters, you're going to be able to collect them, including the ones that are just about to mate, Pete.
Yep.
So, did somebody else wanted to say something there? Right. Okay. Right. So, go on.
Surely, if you're going to have, say, 60 of them for one meal, you're going to need an awful lot if you're going to keep eating them. With the banks of them, or did they have to travel to get them?
Now, that is a very, very important point. Did they travel to get them? That is a very, very important point. The thing is, right, what we've got to ask ourselves, there's a question that has just developed. There's a question developing, right? We can say that there were other, we've got evidence that there was other food available, right? We know that from the other bones of other mollusks and other marine life, up to 30 examples within these mounds. We know that other things were available, right? And I'm going to make it, maybe they preferred limpets because they like the taste.
There must have been loads of crabs, don't you think?
And it's well, But the thing is, we go back to the original question, right? For example, you're not going to find any evidence of them eating lobsters, and you're not going to find any evidence of them eating crabs, because the shells are so soft that they deteriorate and rot much quicker than any other similar material. So you might have them eating crab and so on, but there's going to be no evidence after all this time. So what I'm presuming, what I just made a presumption there, which is flawed and wrong. But I just said obviously that they preferred limpets, but then again they could have preferred crabs. But all the evidence of the crab shells has just deteriorated. Yeah, and that is another point. There was other, there was other things available. Right, so let's go back to this. So
the effort needed to make a meal of crab was far greater than to make a meal of limpets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a very interesting thing here. So what we're going to do, we're going to move off this. We're going to move away from this, and we're going to go back to, where are we? Oh, hang on a minute. We're going to go to there. We're going to start the screen share, and we're going to go back to the other screen. And there we go. Bingo. And here, these. That's what we're going to do. So it's saying that they've started to examine the calcite, which makes up these shells, and they're starting to see that there are seasonal variations within the limpets that are being exploited along the coast. And what they are finding is that the limpets build changes into their shells as they grow, associated with the seasons. And this is what they're understanding from the analysis of these shells. Now, they are actually finding that this is going into the scientific realm of oxygen isotopes. And these allow us to understand where the shells originated from, which was a point that Drina said, well, they all come locally. It's quite possible that because of the oxygen isotopes, basically there's different isotopes within these shells depending on where they were collected, right? And it's very likely that they'd be able to work out if they were local or they'd been brought in. And also they can work out water temperatures and all these different things. They've found out, this is a rather interesting, that the water temperatures at the time the shells were harvested could be compared with the full seasonal temperature range at the site where they lived. This data reveals that limpets were harvested not just at one time of year, but in analyzing the oxygen isotopes, which also gives you evidence of the temperatures at which point the shells were collected. The data reveals that limpets were harvested throughout the winter months also. Limpets may have been consumed in combination with other seasonal foodstuffs such as hazelnut, but we don't have the evidence. The massive important thing about what we are looking at today is really understanding what we've done today, and you've seen it throughout. We've looked at questions, we've answered them, we've come back, we've answered, and this is the way to do things. So the 5 middens on a Ronseer are located, interestingly, around 1 kilometer apart from each other. Now, these are the ones that have survived. We can't be too obsessed with the ones that have survived because there were other mounds that are now under the water. All are close to the current beach line and face east away from the worst of the Atlantic gales. What does that mean? The spacing of the middens seems to suggest that they were made by communities who moved along the shoreline. Now, that's interesting in itself. It's also interesting if they're moving along the shoreline as groups, they are very reliant upon these limpets. And I'm going to propose that the limpets had another purpose as well. Did they exhaust supplies along the stretches of coast when they collected all throughout the year, within a stretch of 1 kilometre apart? And then they moved on to the next, perhaps making various. It's also suggested that they may have moved between one mound and another, and then another mound, and they use these as anchor points to exploit the limpets. But this is reliant upon the assumption that the 5 mounds that we see are the only mounds available within the archaeological record, which I highly doubt. There is something else as well, which is quite stark. When people look at the Neolithic period, which is a period after that, beyond 8,500 years ago, when they look at the Neolithic period, they say, can everybody bear with me a minute? I've got a call coming in, so if you can just bear with me, I'll be back. It's that call. Hello? You're able to talk a minute, you?
So perhaps the kilometre was the distance it required for sustainable farming.
Yeah, possibly.
But of course, we don't know that they might have been hundreds of years apart or completely different communities.
I found with the limpets, once after 2 tides, more would be back.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how or why, but
no. Maybe there's a hierarchy. The lower ones are the less mature ones, and they're trying to work up to the water line to mature.
More than likely, yeah.
Yeah. So if you take the ones from the water line, then they will move up. Interesting.
I'm puzzling over the fact that he says the middens face east. I just thought they were like big pyramid type piles. Are they not? And how do you know which way it's facing?
Yeah, strange.
I'm guessing facing east because they know that the housing or accommodation will have been to the west of where the pile was. So they've just chucked them out that way. But that depends on.
No, well, he's saying that it's away from the worst of the Atlantic gales. The housing's going to be further in, isn't it?
Well, the housing will always be in the lee of the wind, so which will be on the eastern side as well. So it just might mean that the pile is to the east of the house. So.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Which would make sense.
Yes.
Also, I don't know what coastlines they prefer. They may prefer sheltered coastlines to grow as well. Limpets, eh?
Well, they're always on the rocks as opposed to the beach.
Yeah.
Always on the rocks.
Yeah.
I've only ever seen them in sheltered bays, but then I haven't really looked, to be honest, for them on the rest of the way. But
well, no, we wouldn't, would we?
No.
But I will do.
They're always. I'm thinking about the kind of the movement of the water, because obviously they've got to rely on the water bringing the food to them as well. So a sheltered bay would be right, because you'd get the water curling round into the bay and feeding them as well, wouldn't it? So
he's been talking about the midden by the Sully Church.
Yeah.
I mean, here we have the highest rise, the second highest rise and fall of tide in the world.
Yeah.
So the amount of exposure throughout a tide range is tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonder why they lost popularity. You know, if they were
I don't know.
so well received and eaten as we're assuming here, why? I couldn't get any from the fishmonger now. You sort of you don't even think of them as being eaten.
But you don't get many shellfish at all at the moment, do you? Really, you don't get whelks or cockles or winkles or anything like that up here.
We always love cockles.
Yeah, and mussels is about the only thing.
Yeah, but they're not local ones.
No, mussels are farmed now, aren't they?
Yeah,
they farm mussels.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
You can get
that's
your
right. You know, you can
bay
get.
shrimps.
Winkles, we always have winkles with a pin.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah,
get them out with a pin.
that's right.
well, I used to
I
bring them
remember
around
doing
in
that as a
London.
child.
They'd come round the pub on a Friday night or a Saturday night with a tray of them.
Yeah.
Shellfish,
Yeah.
particularly winkles, but they've always got grit in them.
Well, my
Quite
sister,
nice otherwise.
my sister collected cockles. We went down to the bay in Kent, and we collected cockles. We brought them back, and she put them in a bucket of seawater.
Yes,
but added flour to it.
Just flush it out. Yeah,
and they took in the flour and expelled the sand.
That's it. You got to
And
get
so
them flushed out.
consequently, they weren't as gritty, or they were much nicer.
Worth a blooming fortune, cockles. You know.
I suppose it would be now. Yeah. I was looking at cockle rake. I got it there today. Got a cockle rake.
Yeah. Well, there's still all the cockle beds up here are still closed, and I was talking to the guide for the Bay Walk. He does fishing, and he says even the prawns and things are all small. And I said, "Why do you think that is?" And he said that they think, what did they say? That was that the nutrients coming up from the deep water areas that feed them, because they breed. They said he thinks they get hatched out in the deeper water and then come up onto the shallower water to grow. And he said they're not hatching out as much down there because the nutrients and things are not right for them down there. So
most things expand and flourish according to the food supply of the area.
Yeah.
When I was a boy, we would collect a prawn, a live prawn, snap the head off and eat the rest of it.
Yeah.
Live, raw.
Deary me. That's the Cornishman in you, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it is. More than likely, yes. We were to do it.
No, I can't be doing things like that. I tell you what he did come up with as well. The other thing was that fresh water kills them very quickly. So I said, why do I always find lots of little dead shells? And he said, because the fresh water. He said they need a certain amount of salt water, otherwise it kills them.
Yeah.
I thought, oh God, I never thought about it. So when you get the heavy rains and the flooding, it kills the shellfish. So, or some of them anyway.
Yeah. Regularly used to eat those prawns. Somebody snap the head off and eat the rest of it.
That's probably better for you.
Well, probably, yeah. But the legs would still be wriggling.
Yeah, not nice. Not nice.
When you chew them up. Yeah, they're very nice.
Yeah, there were some friends who used to do that with the cooked ones, just put them all in whole and then spit the bits out and going, no. No. I do like shellfish, though.
Well, my uncle was an oyster fisherman, and he looked after the oyster beds in Percule Creek in Falmouth. And Dad and my brother actually went dredging oysters at one point, and dredging oysters on the Fowl.
I've never liked oysters, but wife does. She loves them, but I don't like.
Yeah, I love an oyster, but with a bit of lemon on it, bit of lemon juice.
Mussels and things I like.
To dredge them in the Fowl estuary, they're not allowed to use an engine, a motor.
No, that's right. They've got to row out, haven't they, or sail out?
Row or sail, and then drag everything in on a hand winch.
Yeah. It's good. It keeps it sustainable, though, doesn't it? I mean, these guys fish the prawns; they do it by hand.
Yep, of course it does.
But he was saying that he's one of the few that's licensed to have a net out, so you can put a net out. But if he catches any sea bass, he's got to put them back. Oh. He said that, and he said he got C6 in his net the other day, and he said they're all dead because they've been caught in the net, but we've got to put them back. And I said, well, that's just stupid. Yeah. I mean, if he was, going around and scooping up millions of them, then, that's wrong. But, when you're doing it on an individual basis, that is just ridiculous. And it's sustainable. So
I went out mackerel fishing with my 2 grandsons many years ago now, down in again out of Portleven in Cornwall.
Yeah.
And we'd gone out on this boat, and my 2 grandsons, they caught a few mackerel between them.
Yeah.
But I caught a cod.
Right.
But there was a cod ban on. You weren't allowed to land cod.
Right.
But I had it in a carrier bag.
Yeah. But it's difficult. And the odd one or two.
So it was dead. I mean, there's no point in chucking it back.
No. Well, this is the ruling on the sea bass, because sea bass were quite rare up here about 20 years ago.
Oh, right,
but now they've become very common. But you can't touch them, so it means you can't control them. So of course the ecosystem's getting unbalanced with them now, and what they eat and taking all the other things. So.
Yeah, we try to control these things, but nature is far better at controlling them than we are.
It is. Yeah.
I often think when we're looking at all this, what they're going to do about the global warming, why they don't just look at nature, because nature makes things work. And everything we try and do things, you'll get in a mess.
Yeah.
It's frightening to see these huge trawler nets that they use now that just they just rape the ocean bed, don't they?
Well, and they locate the whole shoal by sonar, and then just take the whole lot in one go. And you're thinking the whole lot just gone. And you're thinking it's no wonder there's none left.
Most of it then is just ground up for fish meal for fertilizer.
Yeah.
But they're catching dolphins and
they catch all sorts.
Everything.
They I don't know whether you heard about it, but they did off the Isle of Man. They were having problems with the scallops, the queenies, which I love. Because they were over dredging it, and to get them up, they do that. They have nets with the chains on to go along the bottom, and it just destroys the whole ecosystem and takes everything with it. So they ban them from certain areas from doing it, and they've regenerated within 5 years, completely regenerated, and now it's becoming sustainable because they're doing that. But they're not keen. They put in, I think 2 years ago, for 125 marine safe areas around the coast of Britain, and the Environment Agency granted them 25, and they said they needed 125 to sustain what's there.
Terrible, isn't it?
Not much chance, I'm afraid.
No, it's.
Oh, well, it was a woman that has won the Fisherman of the Year.
Was it?
Oh,
yes, it was a woman. I heard her on the radio today.
How can she have done? You'd have to be a fisherwoman of the year.
No. They said you should be a fisherwoman, and she said no, she didn't want to be. She was a fisherman because she respected hundreds of years of men doing.
There you go. You see, she just wants to be a man.
I was on Jeremy Vine the other morning.
Well, isn't it a bit politically correct? You're a fisher person.
Yeah.
No, she was quite happy to be a fisherman.
Them, it, her, whatever. Yeah.
I was a chairman of the Flat Home Society, and in some senses, I'd call myself a chairperson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a chairperson. My title is chair.
Yeah, well, that's the way I used to leave it.
Just
as chair. Yeah.
Doesn't matter who you are. Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, the post people.
Post people.
Post men, whether they're female.
Yeah. Oh, it's ridiculous. Hopefully, at the end of this silliness, they'll come out and just say everybody's different, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll all go back to eating shellfish. Limpets.
We over in
I'd love to try some limpets. I mean, Drina and I are doing a lot of weird cooking at the minute and quite enjoying it. And it'd be nice to try.
I don't know where you get
that.
limpets around here.
No,
They certainly don't grow around this bit of the coast at all.
No, they don't.
You'd have to get deeper water, I'm afraid.
Mm.
I'm just reading about how they used to store food back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was saying 500 cakes of ancient butter have been found in bogs of Ireland and Scotland from at least
Wow.
Bronze Age, still
Huh?
edible today.
Wow.
Wow.
I do apologise,
That-
folks.
is that real?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
But I really appreciate that. I don't have to rush now, so thanks for being
Carl,
patient.
did you manage to hear what Margaret just said?
I'm just going to close the door in here. Hang on a minute. Stay there. Stay there.
We're not
Okay.
going
Just
anywhere.
come in. What has Margaret got then? What is it? What are we talking
Well,
about?
I was just reading about food storage in days of old, and it was saying nearly 500 cakes of ancient butter have been found in bogs of Ireland and Scotland from at least the Bronze Age, roughly 5,000 years ago, and it's still edible today.
Wow.
And you know what? Yes, they are out there.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
No,
it
no,
is.
that is massively amazing.
Mm.
Whether I've actually seen some of these. I saw one in the Shetland Museum. This big thing of butter. It was huge.
Bog butter. Call it.
And usually it was used for paying. Usually it was used for paying taxes. But the problem is with this butter
Wow.
is that if you're going to use it to pay taxes, right, to the landlord, you could do all sorts of weird stuff with it, couldn't you?
Yeah. Maybe that's what they got from the Limpets, and that's why there's so many of them.
What? They made butter from limpets?
Yeah.
Shut up, you silly man.
Limpet
Right,
milk.
okay then.
Yeah.
You can't milk limpets. No, Andy, stop it.
Hey, no, we've already done the reproduction bit. Yeah.
We're not milking limpets. Right, okay. So what we were saying, I really appreciate you being patient there. It was a medical thing. So right, I really appreciate that. But anyway, I would say that we're going to crack on, and we haven't got long actually. But I was just about to say that this idea that they're moving between these limpet mounds, but when you read something like this, you're getting the idea that it's only limpets that they're living on. But believe me, all the other evidence is, from whatever else they're eating is gone, right? So we're overemphasizing the evidence associated with these limpets. It's really important evidence, but we can't do this in isolation, right? And remember, these limpet mounds are being constructed, not actually, in a building sense, but they're being built up over a long period of time, possibly, 1,000 years or more, right? So, we're not moving, making these overnight. That's what we're saying. The one thing that we can say about these limpet mounds is that there's no evidence of pottery associated with them. And when we think that there's no evidence of pottery, what is that saying to us? It means there's a different technology going on. There's something else going on. We do understand that some of the other technology, they may have used pebbles to associated with I don't know, breaking some of these limpet shells off the rocks. I don't know. This is what it's suggested. We've got evidence of deer horns. Horn from at least 2 types of deer have been found associated with these limpet shells, but that could mean anything. There have never been. There's not really any evidence of a deer on the island of Aronsay. So the evidence of the horns must have come from the mainland or the island of Rum or Skye. So we've got evidence that they must have traded between these islands. We know, this is the thing, last week, we mentioned about this new technology, the boat, but we did actually mention as well that the evidence of boats is also very much out there in regards to the Mesolithic period. One of the points that I did try and make last week is that everything's in transition, right? And when I say everything's in transition, what you've got is little bits of technology from an earlier period and a lot more boats in this period. Loads of flint being used in the previous period, but lots of microliths being used in this period. There's always overlap. There's always transition. I use the example of the Roman world, where even though we've got AD 43 Roman civilization in Britain, is said that's when the Romans, the invasion happened, but we've already got 100 years of Roman influence and in inferred evidence. So, you know, it's all overlapping. And it's the same with these limpet mounds. Are they just from the Mesolithic period? Could some of these limpet mounds be used in the Paleolithic period or the Neolithic period? And is the other thing as well is my notes tell me this guy Meller, the archaeologist Meller, is quite convinced that suddenly the apparent ceasing of limpet harvesting, a complete way of life that existed for generations and generations, they stopped creating these limpet mounds, right? Not necessarily that they stopped eating limpets, but creating the mounds in the way that they had changed, right? The not being reliant upon these limpet mounds and maybe the level of limpet harvesting and farming tells us of a change in their lifestyle. One of the thing that I was going to say earlier on before the phone call came in, this was the point I missed this point. Meller describes that you could say that in the Mesolithic period, what they're doing with these limpets could only be described as Mesolithic farming. Yes, Mesolithic farming the limpets. Why not? Farming is not just about ploughing fields in the Neolithic or the Bronze Age, right? We do have varieties of grain available in the Mesolithic period being planted because they're able to plant it, right? But not to the degrees that we see in the Neolithic period. The revolution is always everywhere. There's no such thing as the Neolithic revolution. It's the Mesolithic revolution, all these periods of transition. Aron, not far away now. So Aron says middens all date to a similar period in the Mesolithic. And I basically indicated these mounds could have been used for 1,000 years. My notes give a more of a mean and more sensible estimate of more 300 years. But if these mounds are just being used for 300 years, that is 10 generations. So they're being used over a considerable period of time. And this is not the only limpet mounds that would have existed, but the only ones that have survived that we know about. What if under these sand dunes are the other limpet mounds? There's more limpet evidence of Skara Brae, so it's out there. So the apparent ceasing of, as we know, limpet harvesting, a huge change in the narrative. Narratives about the spread of farming have shifted radically over the years. So we're now starting to think that what is farming? How do you explain farming and all these other things? There's been huge debate about the arrival of farming in the British Isles. I would say that farming has always been with us. We needed to farm. We needed to do this. Who from the continent is coming over here telling us, right, what you got to do? You got to do this with limpets. You know, this is a way of farming with limpets. No, they just did it. That's what farming is. You take to farming to survive. End of. It's saying that Meller is saying that when he was a young archaeologist, it was thought that farming spread up the Danube. This is a key point before we finish today, and came north as a result of colonization. In the 1980s, it was trendy to argue that local people made the transition to farming independently. That's me, or with the influence of occasional incomers. Now, this is what Meller supports. The consensus today and the theory that he supports is that the communities who lived on the Ronsay and other islands interbred with incomers. And that's what I say as well. Who didn't wipe them out. Yes, but introduced them to other ways of ensuring a supply of food during the lean winter months, or they just exchanged ideas. I love it. This is my type of archaeology. Something, and when we think about it, maybe somebody said, you don't need to be thoroughly reliant upon limpets. But then again, there's always been deer about on the mainland. Are they introduced in other animals? Well, there may have been aurochs about it. What we're trying to say is that things are always changing, things are always evolving, right? Trade via boat has been going on thousands of years, and people having different ideas, different perspectives. And to be honest with you, right, maybe somebody sat down on one day and thought, right, I've had enough of eating limpets, I want to do something else, end of. So we're going to end there, right? We're going to end there. What I am going to do next week is I'm going to do exactly the same as I did this week. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to work out my mesolithic topic over the next few days, and it'll be new for you next week. So what we are going to do, there's our Ronse today, okay? What we are going to do is I want us to see if there are any questions. And thanks for being patient earlier on. Right, okay. Right, all right then. Okay. Right, Andy, anything you'd like to say, darling?
I was just curious with the Ronse ones, as these mounds are sort of that they know of are a kilometre apart, whether they were the same community moving, which would go with the farming theory, or whether they were separate little communities.
I'm with the separate communities. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's fine. Thank you.
Some of the separate communities. That's what Barry Cunliffe, the Lord Barry Cunliffe, would argue, that you've got individual communities on these islands. That's another thing. Yeah, that's what I'd go with. Anne?
I'd like to taste a limpet. I just think it's a shame that they aren't available to eat anymore in the same way.
Well, you're not going to get them in.
I'm not likely to get them here, am I? No.
Well, what I'll do, Andy will be along the rocks one day, kick a few off, and he'll invite you over the house. And Karen will say
I'll
that
keep my eye open for him in my travels. Yeah.
Yeah, but Andy, Karen's not going to be really happy that your house is stinking to high heaven.
Oh no, I'll not bring the limpets in. She'll not. She likes seafood, but she'll not like limpets. But
Andy, I'm trying to avoid your marriage falling apart. Okay.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah, I'm looking after you, Andy. Right. Right, David.
No, thank you.
Oh, hang on. We've got to say goodbye, David.
Bye, David.
Bye, David.
Bye-bye.
You're going to stay, David. David, we'll see you next week. We love you lots. And did you get my message, David?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, David. If you've got to go, David, we'll see you next week. If not, carry on. Anyway, Margaret, anything you'd like to say?
Well, as you say, I think it would have just been part of their diet, and all the other things that they would have eaten have disappeared. So there's no evidence really, other than from coprolites that might turn up every now and then.
I'm gonna go with part of their diet. And you know what? The one good thing about doing the Mesolithic period is that we've done the Paleolithic period, and we really tore the Paleolithic period apart. We really did, and all that has been a vehicle for now understanding the Mesolithic period. And we did pretty well tonight. And it's like opening that box and being corrected, as Pete did at the beginning. What are you talking about? And I've said I'm talking about both. So yeah, cool. Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Margaret. Pat?
Oh, nothing. Thank you very much.
Pat, it won't be limpets next week, Pat, so don't worry about
it. Good.
Mussels.
Shut up,
Oysters.
No, whelks. Right, Peter.
Well, if you look at the mounds of limpet shells, so it seems that the only use for them was to eat the limpets, and they had not found a use for the shells, and that's why they're in mounds. Otherwise, they would take them and use them if they found a use for the shells. All these mounds of limpet shells means they had no other use for them.
But they'd have been collected over thousands of years, wouldn't they?
Well,
yes, but they had no other use for them.
Yeah. There is the other thing. There is the other thing as well, is right, which has been completely missed from these notes, and I think Andy will remember this, right? That they may have been collected and just disregarded because these limpets were seen as predators for other mollusks on the rocks, and these would have eaten at. This is a very key important point. limpets would eat away at all the algae and all the new growing kelp beds and all the rest of it. And I think, Andy, if you can remember way back, somebody did suggest this, and we haven't mentioned it today, but somebody did suggest.
He's ringing a bell.
Yeah, it is ringing a bell. Somebody did suggest that they were just disregarded. I know Pete thinks that's abhorrent. I think that's abhorrent, but they're very predatory, and they would remove everything. They strip everything from the rocks. If you remove them from the rocks, whatever they're harvesting off the rocks, lava bread, for example, you can have no lava bread or anything. So think about that one. That's a really interesting one. I don't know where that came from there, but yeah. Now that was to do with you, Pete. I turned it around. Drina.
Could you use the shells for a tool, like a scraper or something? I don't know how strong the shells are.
Yeah.
You could definitely use them from insulation. And if you fill Pete's mouth up with these shells, he wouldn't be able to talk.
They use shells for decorating pottery as well, don't they? Creating the patterns in them.
Yeah.
But not, I don't think limpets as much, but the...
And sandcastles.
The actual inside of the shell is quite pretty, actually, the inside of the shell.
Yeah.
It's quite smooth and quite...
They eat barnacles off the bottom of ships.
The crammy, they call it, I think. Is that the term for it? Nacre.
Yes.
I think one of the possible reasons that there's lots of them are still around is because they tend to be thicker than most of the shells as well.
Yes.
And they've lasted longer. So.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is the thing. We saw this throughout the Paleolithic period. There were certain types of evidence that survived, and we've obsessed. Yeah. What we have done today, we've obsessed about limpets, but we have torn it apart.
Yeah.
We have torn the subject apart, and this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to take something simple, Mesolithic period, and tear it apart limb for limb, and that's what we've done. And we've come up with one other thing at the end, that everything that we've been saying is met by that one big challenge, that these were predatory, and we're answering this at the end, and that's where we've been. And this must have been so fascinating for David. He's still with us. It's very brave of Dave. He's never stayed this long. We love him to bits. Right, is there anything else that anyone would like to say before we finish?
No.
Right,
good one.
Yeah, that was a good one. I enjoyed that.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That was a good one. Thanks. I really appreciate your endorsement, Pete. Don't worry about it. Oh, okay.
I won't be with you tomorrow.
Pete,
tomorrow evening.
Or the evening.
I might in the day, but I won't be with you in the evening.
Well, it'll be 11 o'clock, Pete. So yeah.
11 o'clock. Okay, up there, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, up there. Arr, yeah, up there.
What do you mean, arr? You can't do arr. You can't do it. You've got no way of doing it.
Arr.
Yes,
Pete,
you can't do arr with a Canadian accent, can you?
No, Pete, can I ask you? Can I ask you a question, Pete? Right, what is a pirate's favorite chocolates?
What's a pirate's favorite chocolate?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. What is a pirate's favorite
chocolate?
After 8, sir.
That's not bad for you, Carl. That's not bad.
No, I think I made that one up. It's quite a good one.
That's all right. It's good.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Oh my God, I'm getting these endorsements of everyone. I'm getting really upset. Right. So, anyone else want to say anything else before we go?
Nope.
No. What we're doing next week?
Oh no, I'm not telling you.
Oh, that's not fair.
The reason why I want to link in with I'll know tomorrow where I want to go. What I'm thinking of doing next week will be a settlement site, but it's not going to be it's not going to be Starcar. It will be. I want to do a Mesolithic settlement site next week. All right.
I thought we were doing Winkles.
Howick.
It's not Howick. It's Hoik. You nunk.
Hoik.
It's spelled Howick.
Yeah.
But it's Hoik.
Yeah, unless it's spelled Leicester.
And also Leominster's Leicester and Shrewsbury is Shrewsbury.
No, it's Shrewsbury. My
Shut up.
my uncle was mayor. He called it Shrewsbury.
Shrewsbury.
Oh my God, this is really getting beyond.
Mm.
Right, okay. All right, folks.
Arnside.
No way Happisburgh can be Haysborough.
Yeah, Haysborough, it's Happisburgh. Yeah, Haysborough it is.
Yeah, no way.
It is. Shut up, it is. I'm going to do the Neanderthal thing. Mind you, I'm more typical Denisovian, I think. Like my massive nose, look at it, it's huge. You know what, right? It's like a Pinocchio nose. Madness. Right,
It's a bit
okay,
Roman,
folks.
isn't it?
Roman
It's a bit
nose.
Roman.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roman all over his face.
Oh, the old ones are the best.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Nice one,
definitely.
Pete.
Oh, definitely.
One up for the Celts. Yeah.
Oh, you.
We had to get there in the end. Yeah.
Just thought we've forgotten about that for a wee while.
Now that is I've out with the penalty. I can't even get a penalty in there.
Red card,
Doing a
red card.
competition this last week, and it was an international. So I said, I'm playing for Cornwall. Oh, but no, you can't. It's got to be a country. It's international. I said, no, it's international.
Yeah.
And Cornwall is a nation.
Yep.
So in the end, they had to accept it, and I won it, and they had to put the flag of Cornwall up and saying, yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
There we go.
Back of the net.
Can I just ask you one last thing? You know that oil rig off the Norfolk Coast Guard Seal Land or whatever, right? Which is technically a country, right?
Yes.
They actually issue passports for it as well.
Do they really?
They do. You can get a passport. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wartime installation. Isn't it? They got the guy went and took
exactly.
over. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then they recognised it.
Exactly.
We have an independent land of Peel as well. Peel Island. They have a king of Peel, and he is recognised as a genuine king.
Oh yes, Peel Bay, yeah, Peel Harbour. Not Pearl Harbour, Peel Harbour. Oh, flipping heck. Right. Okay, folks. If nobody else has got anything else to say, I'm going to say goodnight to Andy, Peter, David, Pat, Anzi, Margaret, and Drina, and that's it. That's everybody. So I'll see you all next week. A settlement site in the Mesolithic next week.
Great. Scott, good one. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, I've enjoyed it. Take care. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Night. Take care. Bye. And I got to go outside and do everything. So don't forget to like, subscribe. If you're invading Poland, let me know. There's nothing in the chat box. I'm going. Bye-bye, folks.